Okay.
Well, here we are again, Dave.
Yep.
I'm John Swaino, and this is
Dave Tenney.
and we are Two Beards and a Bible. We welcome you back. We left off last time, and we indicated that we would begin at Matthew 12, the first 8 verses of Matthew 12, and we're going to talk about the account of Jesus defending the disciples when they were plucking grain on the Sabbath. And this, of course, caused a stir with the Pharisees. And we want to read about that and learn a little bit from this account, as that's what it is here for. So let's go Matthew 12, starting at verse 1. At that time, Jesus went through the grain fields on the Sabbath, and his disciples were hungry and began to pluck heads of grain and to eat. And when the Pharisees saw it, they said to him, "Look, your disciples are doing what is not lawful to do on the Sabbath." But he said to them, "Have you not read what David did when he was hungry, he and those who were with him? How he entered the house of God and ate the showbread, which was not lawful for him to eat, nor for those who were with him, but only for the priests? Or have you not read in the law that on the Sabbath the priests in the temple profane the Sabbath and are blameless? Yet I say to you that in this place there is one greater than the temple. But if you had known what this means, I desire mercy and not sacrifice, you would not have condemned the guiltless. For the Son of Man is Lord even on the Sabbath."
Okay.
We'll have you go ahead and pick up in Mark 2.
Mark chapter 2.
Verse 23 through 28.
Mark 2. It says the disciples of John and the Pharisees were fasting. No, it's 23. Okay, I'm sorry. I apologize for that. Now it happened that he went through the grain fields on the Sabbath, and they went to this, and they went. His disciples began to pluck the heads of grain, and the Pharisees said to him, "Look, why do they do what is not lawful on the Sabbath?" And he said to them, "Have you never read that David did when he was in need and hungry, and those with him, and how he went to the house of God in the days of Abiathar the high priest, and ate the showbread, which is not lawful to eat except for the priests, and also gave some to those who were with them? And he said to them, the Sabbath was made for man, and not man for the Sabbath. Therefore, the Son of Man is also Lord of the Sabbath." Pretty much says same thing.
And Luke chapter 6, the first 5 verses, it's very similar. And so, the Pharisees accused the disciples and Jesus of doing what?
They were threshing, right?
Right.
That would be the closest thing that they could come up with, because threshing would be against the law.
Right.
That's actually real work.
Right. And working for gain and so
on. I don't know. Have you ever ate wheat off of the head in the field like that?
No.
It's not good.
I imagine.
It doesn't taste good at all.
Right.
It's kind of chewy,
Uh-huh.
It's like, if you ever had some, what are those, oatmeal.
Okay.
Just get your handful of oatmeal and chew on that.
Right.
It's not far from that.
I know my grandpa used to take some of the stuff that he was cutting, and he would eat it. I never did, but yeah, I don't imagine. It didn't look appetizing.
No, it's not like they're out there, having a 3 or 5 course meal.
Right.
So they're out there eating. It's sustenance
mm-hmm.
at its most basic level.
Right, and Jesus points out, that David did that when he had need, and so on.
And I believe that is in. Did I have that written down? 1 Samuel chapter 21. I thought maybe we could go read that.
All right.
1 Samuel.
I'll come along for the ride.
Okay. 1 Samuel 21. It says, "Now David came to Nob, to Ahimelech the priest, and Ahimelech was afraid when he met David. And he said to him, saying, Why are you alone, and no one is with you? So David said to Ahimelech the priest, The king has ordered me on some business, and said to me, Do not let anyone know anything about the business for which I send you, or what I have commanded you, and that I have directed my young men to such and such a place. Now get therefore, what have you on hand? Give me 5 loaves of bread in my hand, or whatever can be found. The priest answered David and said, There is no common bread on hand, but there is the holy bread. If the young man have at least kept themselves from women. Then David answered the priest and said, Truly women have been kept from us about 3 days since I came out, and the vessels of the young men are holy, and the bread is in effect common, even though it was consecrated in the vessel this day. So the priest gave him holy bread, for there was no bread there but the showbread, which had been taken from before the Lord, in order to put hot bread in its place on the day when it was taken away. Okay, so I'm going to stop there.
Mm-hmm.
The interesting thing about this, so Jesus, I think what he's doing is he's trying to show the Pharisees how hypocritical they are.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he says, "Oh, you're telling me that we're doing something against the law, but you know, you would never say that David was sinning when he did this."
Mm-hmm. Right, and you hear the same thing in a court of law, where it can be argued that there's the letter of the law, but there's also the spirit of the law. You know, why was that law written? You know, and to what purpose was it at that point in time? You know, there are some crazy laws still on the books in some cities. You know, like don't hitch your horse to a lamppost between the hours of such and such and such and such, and you must only walk east and west on a certain road during a certain time. You do crazy things like that. But you know, those laws were put on the books at a time and for a purpose. And sometimes we get so wrapped up in checklists. Have I done this? Have I done this? Have I done this? And we lose track of what the whole purpose was.
Yeah. So David goes to this priest and he says, in effect, the bread is common, and you know the showbread had to be replaced. Was it every? No, it was only on the Sabbath.
Mm-hmm.
The showbread was placed before the altar, and what was there, week-old bread, was taken out, and that was for the priests to eat. Mm-hmm. So in effect, it was the priest's bread at that point,
right?
And they had control over it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so they were. You know, obviously David didn't do anything wrong,
right? And then you know the priests did work on the Sabbath as well. You know, they were in the temple doing work for the Lord. So, you know, again, it's not the idea of the exertion of work. It's, you know, it's to set aside the day for the Lord and to put aside all the things that you would strive for, you know, for the rest of the week.
That was the purpose of the Sabbath.
Right.
But somehow they turned it into a list of things you can and cannot do.
Right. And you can, you can only lift one finger and not two.
Yeah, or you can only walk so far.
Right.
I mean, they came up with a lot of different rules. That's why they called it a Sabbath day journey.
Right.
You know, they had all these different rules that they put in place, you know, to kind of define what everything was.
Right. And the one thing that we keep coming back to, which I think is just the end of the story, is that this is Christ. He has all authority. You know? And he has the authority to have his disciples do these things.
I have a little note in my Bible, and at the end of this I wrote, Jesus and his apostles profaned the Sabbath by Pharisaical I don't know how to say that. I wrote Pharisaical standards, not by the law.
Right.
Yeah. Thanks, John.
Right.
But, you know, they profaned the Pharisees' law rather than the actual law of God. And that's what they were being blamed from. Right.
And you know, the same thing stands today, that men cannot interpret the law according to our own thoughts, you know, for our own desires. You know, it says what it says.
It says what it says.
Yeah.
So he says, for even at the end there, he says that, you know, the Son of Man is Lord, even on the Sabbath.
Right.
And I think we touched on that last week, but you know, Jesus, he's above the law.
Right.
He is above the law.
And the Sabbath was made for man and not man for the Sabbath. You know, that's that's still the whole point there. That, you know, it's where we try to turn things around and make it our own. Well, I think we've done that. Spoken enough there. Let's move on to healing a withered hand.
Okay.
And that's Matthew 12. And I'm almost there. Matthew 12, starting at verse 9.
Where's it go to?
And it goes to verse 14.
Okay. You going to read that?
I can read that.
If you want.
And then maybe you can do Mark 3, 1 through 6.
Okay.
Matthew 12, starting at verse 9. It says, "Now when he had departed from there, he went into their synagogue, and behold, there was a man who had a withered hand. And they asked him, saying, Is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath? That they might accuse him. Then he said to them, What man is there among you who has one sheep, and if it falls into a pit on the Sabbath, will not lay hold of it and lift it out? Of how much more value, then, is a man than a sheep? Therefore it is lawful to do good on the Sabbath. Then he said to the man, Stretch out your hand. And he stretched it out, and it was restored as whole as the other. Then the Pharisees went out and plotted against him, how they might destroy him."
Okay, it says, "And he entered the synagogue again, and a man was there who had a withered hand, so they watched him closely, whether he would heal him on the Sabbath, so that they might accuse him." It just cracks me up. "And he said to the man who had the withered hand, Step forward. And then he said to them, Is it lawful on the Sabbath to do good or to do evil, to save life or to kill? But they kept silent. And when he had looked around at them with anger, being grieved by the hardness of their hearts, he said to the man, Stretch out your hand. And he stretched it out, and his hand was restored as whole as the other. Then the Pharisees went out and immediately plotted with the Herodians against him, how they might destroy him." These guys hate him so much.
Yeah.
I mean, here's this thing that they should have been rejoicing over.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we talked about this before, but you know, they just had no love.
Yeah, yeah, and they're just we see this. We still see this even among men today. You know, not even, you know, I'm not speaking of the church, but you know, it could be. But we see, if you turn on the news, you see those that you know, lie in wait to catch somebody doing something. You know, we have all kinds of people that try to catch people and trip people up so that they can have some kind of political gain,
Some sort of narrative.
right? You know, and I've even, you know, in the workplace sometimes you'll see that. I've even worked in a place years ago where I know that there was a person that was just sitting back and making trouble, you know, and hoping that they could catch me doing something, you know, and that's there are some people that do those things, and the Pharisees were doing just that. They just had such a hate for him. They were just waiting to accuse him, you know, and as you mentioned, you know, it is that hardness of heart. They just, out of all the things that they've seen, they just couldn't accept it.
It said they were waiting to see if he would heal him.
Right.
I mean, good grief.
So that tells us that they knew that he could.
Yeah.
They'd seen it before.
Wouldn't that make you a little concerned?
Right.
That you're going against this person who seems to have these powers from God?
It shows you just how far mankind can be deceived.
Yeah.
And we're no different. You know, we're up here, you know, talking about, you know, these people, and maybe we can get a little bit harsh on them at times, but we, each and every one of us, have to make sure that we don't fall into that same trap of some sort of power trip. You know, it's easy to do. It's easy to start to have a high estimation of your own abilities and your own self-worth.
They hate him so much that they band together with the Herodians, who they had long been enemies with. They hated Herod.
Right.
You know, Herod was not a Jew, yet he sat as king over Judea. But they decided that they were going to band together with them and plot together to try to kill Jesus. It just blows me away.
Mm-hmm. And I turned over to Luke, and at Luke 6, verse 11, speaking of the same thing, after this man stretched out his hand and his hand was restored, it says, but they were filled with rage and discussed with one another what they might do to Jesus. And I kind of wrote a little note in my notes here that says that they lost their minds.
They lost their minds.
They got what they wanted. They were sitting and lying in wait, looking for, is he going to heal this person, and waiting for that to happen so they could have an accusation, and then they went and lost their minds afterwards. They were filled with madness. I think this is the New King James, and I think when I was preparing for the lesson, I was in the NASB, and it says filled with madness.
Yes.
And
part of the narrative that's kind of goes into that. So Jesus asks them a question:
mm-hmm.
Is it lawful to do good or evil?
Right.
And they kept quiet. And how did Jesus act? He says, and when he had looked around at them with anger,
mm-hmm.
So Jesus is not real happy about this whole thing.
Right.
And of course, that had to have just that was kindling on the fire. It just had to make them even madder.
Right. All right. I think we might have time to
hit the next
move
section.
On to the next section there. And here we're looking at Matthew 12, starting at verse 15, and then Mark 3, starting at verse 7. So let's go back to...
I'll read Matthew. I'll go ahead and read that.
Okay.
Mark 3. But Jesus withdrew his disciples to the sea, and a great multitude from Galilee followed him, and from Judea and Jerusalem and Idumea, and beyond the Jordan, and those from Tyre and Sidon. A great multitude, when they heard how many things he was doing, came to him. So he told his disciples that a small boat should be kept ready for him because of the multitude, lest they should crush him. For he healed many, so that as many as had afflictions pressed about him to touch him. And the unclean spirits, whenever they saw him, fell down before him and cried out, saying, You are the Son of God. But he sternly warned them that they should not make him known.
I'll go ahead and read Matthew 12, starting at verse 15. But when Jesus knew it, he withdrew from there, and great multitudes followed him, and he healed them all. Yet he warned them not to make him known, that it might be fulfilled which was spoken by Isaiah the prophet, saying, Behold, my servant whom I have chosen, my beloved in whom my soul is well pleased. I will put my spirit upon him, and he will declare justice to the Gentiles. He will not quarrel nor cry out, nor will anyone hear his voice in the streets. A bruised reed he will not break, and smoking flax he will not quench, till he sends forth justice to victory. Oh, I got one more. And in his name, Gentiles will trust.
Oh, that's important. So, Jesus has this interaction with the Pharisees, and what's interesting is what you read. He says when Jesus knew it, that he knew at this time. So the previous verses, verse 14 says, then the Pharisees went out and plotted against him, how they might destroy him. But when Jesus knew it, he withdrew from there.
Mm-hmm.
Early on, Jesus knew what the Pharisees were trying to do.
Right.
I mean, this wasn't like something that he found out later. Right at the beginning of his ministry, he knows what he's dealing with.
Right. Right. And we have this multitude of people that are coming out to hear him, which is only going to kindle that rage.
Oh, yeah, because they're more for him. He's more popular.
Right. And that's, again, in common times, we see that. We see that it's a popularity party, and people want that popularity. They want that notoriety. And here we have Jesus, whom they should be every bit as excited about, but he's a threat to their popularity.
In fact, that's why he got with the Herodians, because that's why the Pharisees and the Herodians were teaming up.
Mm-hmm.
They had a common enemy.
And when we think about when you were reading there in the account that you read, talked about there being so many people that he instructed that an extra boat be ready that he might cast off in case so that he wouldn't be crushed. And have you ever been in a big crowd like that where you felt you might be crushed?
I have. One time I had found out about this concert that Prince was going to be putting on this private show. Okay, so I went with a buddy of mine, and we're in there, and I'm telling you, my buddy and I, we were like 2 grains of salt in a pepper shaker.
Right.
We were the only white guys in that room.
Oh.
We were excited, though, because we were going to see Prince, and it was like right there. And Prince decided that his throat was sore. He wasn't going to do the show.
Oh, my.
And people were not happy, and I was scared.
Oh.
Not because, they weren't white people, just because you had a lot of people and people were upset.
Right.
And, I remember I was like, oh, man, just get me out of this,
I had a time in my life when I worked for a concert venue, and my station was in what was called the mosh pit. And it got pretty tight in there at times, and also, my family and I went to New York City for the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade a few years back, and I've never been in such a tight crowd as that. I mean, I really was beginning to feel like I needed to push people out of the way to take a breath.
Wow.
It was that tight, and that was a big crowd, and we see that that's the kind of thing that we see described here, that that's the fervor that was there for Christ, and makes you wonder, we don't see that very often these days where people have that kind of fervor that they would pack any kind of building to hear the word of God.
No, not at all. Yeah, it seems like those days are behind us, but that they could come back again.
But the word of God is able.
It is.
We know that, and in large part it's our fault because we fail to put the word out many times, and that's, speaking of, that's kind of what we are hoping to do here.
Yeah.
That's why we're recording these things, that hopefully the word would get out to more people. But what did Jesus do for the multitude?
Well, I mean, obviously he was healing them.
Mm-hmm.
He's preaching, and I think the idea of his message was, the kingdom of heaven is at hand.
Right.
And as we read further on, we'll read about the Beatitudes. We'll kind of get a taste for what one of Christ's sermons was like.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting here. There's this in Matthew's account. There's this quotation of Isaiah chapter 42,
mm-hmm.
which you read, and the thing that I thought was really interesting is a verse 20 and 21 out of this. In verse 20 says, "A bruised reed he will not break, and smoking flax he will not quench, till he sends forth justice to victory, and in his name the Gentiles will trust." And the thing that I guess I might be totally wrong about this, but you think about that. He's talking about people,
mm-hmm.
right? Somebody's he's describing a person as smoking flax, or a bruised reed and he's not going to break them.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the idea of, we have to be, this is what I got out of this, is we need to be patient with people.
Mm-hmm.
And Christ was patient with people. Somebody may be just smoldering, just,
right.
They may be either dying out or catching on fire. We don't know. But we got to be patient with people.
Maybe you can help me remember the statement that says, we need to be as harmless as doves, but what's the part before that?
Oh, wow.
I mean, we need to be those that are empowered. We have the word, so we need to step forth with some confidence, but we need to be harmless as doves.
Yeah, and then he says, in his name the Gentiles will trust, and that's Isaiah making
mm-hmm.
that prophecy.
Right.
Hundreds of years before this, the Pharisees should have known.
Mm-hmm.
that, it just wasn't going to be a Jewish nation forever.
Right.
The Gentiles were going to have a part in this somehow.
Right. And, and as I always used to tell my driving school students, from experience, we can look around and understand that mankind doesn't like to learn from other people's learning experiences. You can write down, this is what happened to me, don't do it. But a lot of times we want to try it ourselves, and we don't learn until we've gone through it ourselves.
Yeah.
And so, we see what happened when Christ was here on this earth. We see all those people that should have known better. And as one of my cousins used to say, you've been told. We have the scriptures, we've been told.
Yeah, and really, nothing is different today than it was back then.
People are the same.
Yeah. I mean, the fact that we have God's word is a miracle.
Yeah.
It's a miracle in itself.
It is. Speaking of, being God-breathed.
Yeah.
It truly is.
People don't want to believe that there is a God and that, God created everything. But listen, there's never been a case where inanimate things have created life.
Right.
Where things that were dead made life.
Right.
It's never been a thing ever.
Mm-hmm.
Life comes from life.
Right.
And we had to come from life.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. We're supposed to be carbon-based life forms. Let's go throw some coal in a jar and some other things, shake it up real good and see what we get.
Yeah.
And we're not going to get anything.
No, we're not going to get
what we put in there. So anyway, I guess we can stop there. Next time we'll talk about the selection of the 12 apostles. And for that, we'll be looking into Matthew chapter 10. So we hope that you'll join us then and look into the scriptures again with us. Hopefully this time has been helpful to you. And if you have any questions, then by all means reach out to us. You can find our information through the page here. We would love to hear from you. And if we can be of assistance in your studying of the scriptures, we would, of course, enjoy the opportunity to do that. So without further ado, this is John Swaino and Dave Tenney, and we'll catch you next time.
All right. Thank you.